But then another season is in the history books, and I think it's time to do a little bit of reflecting and see the things that we've learned across the last year and where it's going to set us up for going forward. It was a roller coaster of emotions, the 24th season, and I think it'll be one that you look back on as a bit of a fork in the road for many, many reasons. But let's get into it. Number one, we're not equipped, and injuries ruined us. So poor results domestically and poor results in Europe resulted in what was considered one of United's biggest failures of a season in recent history. And that's despite winning the FA Cup. It is our lowest league finish, and it was an extremely disappointing exit in the Champions League. And the FA Cup does salvage some of that. I think the FA Cup and the circumstances and the performance of the FA Cup gives it a different ending and a different feeling. But objectively, the number of losses that we suffered this season and the performances, particularly in Europe, were bad. And you can argue amongst yourselves about the reasons for that. I'm just being objective here with it. You know, the performance in the league, performance in Europe, not good. Performance in the FA Cup, good. Can't argue with that. The lack of quality in the squad depth is huge. When you look at, you have to try and chase down Manchester City in that sense, and when they've got the likes of, you can make a case that Alvarez and at one point Foden was their backups. You see some of the talent that they've got at their disposal. Doku is a backup to Grealish / Foden at times. We just don't have that level of depth, and injuries bit in a couple of very key positions and very quickly exposed the level beyond the starting 11, and even arguably the level in the starting 11 is a long way off. So much so that you've seen so many players in different positions. Casemiro, McTominay, Wan-Bissaka, Garnacho, Bruno, all been deployed in different positions. Even Anthony at left back was a bit of a curveball for us. But it means that they've either switched sides, they've took on a new role altogether. We saw Amrabat as a fullback, and we've been absolutely devastated by the injuries. And we've not been on our own in this. There's been a couple of clubs with that, and I'd like to really drill down into why that has been the case. But replacements and smart signings in the summer will be key for how we make up lost ground, and hope a little bit of luck with some players getting a bit of a rest. Lisandro Martinez massively getting a rest. Marcus Rashford, if he is to stay, because I actually don't know if he is going to stay. If he gets a rest over the summer, I think that'll be very beneficial for him to do that. We are in the Europa League next season after collecting the FA Cup, so you are going to require a squad that can compete on multiple fronts. The young players that have come in, whether that's Mainu or Willy Kambala, those two particular I think have looked really good. I think Howson still looks a little bit off it, and Wheatley and that didn't really get a chance to show us much more than a mere cameo. But Kambala looks like he's got something about him. Obviously Mainu's unreal. We're going to need more youngsters to step up like that, as well as some good signings, as well as better luck with injuries next season. Right, we've got another one here for you then, and it is brought to you by the Spring Cleaning Aces Manscaped. This season, it's all about sorting out your carpets and the drapes of the big names in below-the-waist grooming. Say goodbye to winter fuzz with Manscaped's Lawnmower 5.0 and watch as your confidence blooms like those April showers, Mayflowers. Step into the season and join 10 million fellas worldwide who put their trust in Manscaped. Swim by manscaped.com. Enter the code 5THINGS, that's the number 5 and things, for 20% off plus free shipping. After getting acquainted with Manscaped, I am all in that spring fever. Let's welcome the season's champion, the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. There are 2 interchangeable heads, one for a standard trim and the new foil blade for when you're in the mood for smooth. You've got LED lights. You can take it in the bath so you don't have to worry about the cleanup. It'll go in the shower. It's waterproof. You can go wherever you want with it. And it's also a nice compact case that it comes in. It is the go-to travel companion. And don't forget, spring cleaning isn't just about your balls, it's about the full grooming experience with Manscaped as well. You got the Beard Hedger Pro Kit and the Handyman Electric Face Shaver. Now 20% off and get free shipping with the code 5things at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and nothing on the shipping with the code 5things at Manscaped. Nothing quite like a little bit of spring cleaning in your kecks. Go get it done. Number 2, something isn't clicking. There's something not been right with United at the moment, and the playing squad not clicking together. Huge disconnect between the players and the coaches, and I would say up until the FA Cup final, between the players and the fans as well. On the pitch, we've looked lost so many times. I mean, we finished with 3 victories: Newcastle, Brighton, Manchester City. Don't know if there's any United fans actually thought that was going to happen. And going into every one of those games, it was like, all right, well, we won last week, but we're not going to win today. It was weird. There was a disconnect, something not quite working. We don't look drilled outside of the FA Cup final. You could argue like we haven't looked like we had a specific game plan or tactics to play through. And I think Ten Hag's interview with Gary Neville was a real big moment in the season where a lot of people was listening to what he was saying. I thought Ten Hag's personal explanation as why he opts to coach plan A instead of plan B or C offered insights into why those injury struggles have really hurt us. Tactical familiarity does come from consistency, comes from practice and success, working in specific ways of setting up and playing. And you also, you don't want to play for a manager that doesn't. People call managers stubborn, and that is accurate. But you wouldn't believe in a manager that had a different, like, he watched a game at the weekend and was like, oh, I like that, we're going to play that. And it's 180 degrees from how you actually play. You know, you don't mind evolutions and tweaks and things like that. But if he's coming with, like, listen, the only way for us to play is with a back 4, and then, like, we'll have a alternating fullback that'll invert into midfield. So it'll almost be like a 3 and a 3, and it'll be blah, 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 and that's how we're going to do it. And then the next week he goes, no, we have to play a 3 with fullbacks that are going to overlap. And you're like, you know, they're principles that don't align. You know, you can maybe see someone that goes, listen, I want to play a 3, but what we're going to do is try and overload midfield by one of the players stepping out into that, and we'll use the wing backs to help us overload, and we'll end up with like 5 against 3 in the middle if we do that. That's not necessarily a complete deviation from, you know, oh, I want to have a 2 striker system, so we're going to play 3-4-3 with a 1 striker system. Like, managers have to have an element of being stubborn. They have to believe in what they're going to do strongly for you to go along with it. If every single Monday you came in and you spent 4 days working on a new system, you wouldn't have a fucking clue what you're doing. You know, and at the highest level, there's so much detail to what you're going to be required to do. And that's, you know, and a lot of football tactics are also on what the opposition are likely to do and how they're likely to hurt you. You haven't got enough time in the working week to be able to work on everything that you need to work on to a high degree. If you've not got some sort of embedded principles that overarch what you're trying to say as a manager. So I get him wanting to stick with plan A and not switching to a plan B or C, which we didn't see until a final, where in the final he did come out with a tactical game plan which was extremely effective, and it managed to beat Pep Guardiola's Manchester City. And I can understand wanting to do that in a one-off game like an FA Cup final, where you go, listen, there's no credit for me trying to play plan A, gallantly failing here today. I just need to get that trophy in my hands at the end of the day, and here's the best way for us to do that. And then over pre-season, hopefully you get to embed what plan A looks like a little bit more and get the right things in and the right players in and actually rock and roll it. You know, it's impossible to get familiarity drilled in with how you want to look on a consistent basis if that consistent basis changes all the time. So, you know, I get what he was trying to say. I don't necessarily agree, because I think you could have been way more pragmatic still. But, you know, that was what he chose to go with, and I actually think, even though we sit here right now not having a clue if he's going to be sacked or if he's going to be kept on, it is honestly a knife edge. It could go left and it could go right, and I don't have any bead on which way it's going to go whatsoever. I wouldn't be surprised with him staying, and I wouldn't be surprised with him going. I wouldn't be surprised. I think both options are equally likely at the moment. And I think no matter what happens from this point, I think he'll potentially look back at the decision to persevere with plan A, if he does go, as a massive reasoning why. Because if it had been a little bit more pragmatic, fourth was there for us. And I think fourth in an FA Cup is far easier to stand there and defend with the amount of injuries than eighth in an FA Cup. Number 3, and this sort of leads on from that, really. Ten Hag's really stubborn. I mean, really, really stubborn. His first year shown us he was stubborn. The second year just kind of built on that. He absolutely stays true to himself. And you do want that. You know, I'm not going to cover all ground, but I think the disciplinary record and his action is what he's probably done best at Manchester United. The way he's dealt with some things, and the way he's given out like proper cast iron bollockings against the biggest personalities in the game, in Cristiano Ronaldo, Jadon Sancho. Varane's had a pasting. Sounds like Casemiro's potentially had a pasting. Rashford has had a pasting. Garnacho has had a pasting. Like, it seems like there isn't a player that hasn't had a bollocking at some point. Now, some people will go, oh, that means he can't work with people. I disagree. I think it shows that the disciplinarian that we want, or we wanted, has actually come here. And you can't ask for this squad needs discipline and this squad needs blah, 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 and then kick off at like, oh, he's a bit harsh, isn't he? This is what you got to do. And sometimes some people ain't going to like it. I think when Ten Hag reflects on it, it's going to be interesting to see if he continues down the same one or he softens. I mean, he's had some shit to deal with through Maguire, through Cristiano, through Sancho, through Anthony. You know, Greenwood's issue wasn't his own, but it's like he's had to deal with all of these things. Marcus Rashford stuff, you know, he had one early doors, he fell foul of it. You know, it was no drama. The Belfast one, he fell foul again. It seemingly got cleared up. You know, he's obviously capable of dealing with these situations, and I think it's about time that United had someone that isn't a soft touch and actually has the authority to be like, no, I'm not standing for this fucking around. I want people who are going to do what they're told to do. And I think at some point there has to be some accountability from the players themselves. Absolutely. You know, I think that the dressing room should be policed by itself. You know, when you listen to some of the ex-players from Roy Keane and Neville and Rooney and Rio and some of the players that had that sort of high standard of what's expected on the pitch and in the dressing room and the effort that's required in training. You know, the thing that always stood out to me from the very early Fergie teams, particularly, you know, the 2 Champions League winning teams, when you listen to people talking about those, they always say the hardest match of the week was training. I don't think United's hardest match of any week is training at the moment. Partially because of I think the hardest thing is getting seen in the treatment room at Old Trafford or at Carrington at the moment. I don't think the hardest match of any week at the moment is in training. And I think if you want to install that culture, you're going to have to piss a few people off to do it. And he has to be allowed to piss people off. I think that's the most important thing here. Number 4. And again, when we look back, this will be a fork in the road moment. Hopefully it's a positive turn and not further down the road to ruin that the Glazers are in. But the Ineos takeover confirmed. And certainly an inflection point. Don't know if I'd call it a highlight yet. It's probably too early. It feels like it's the movement for getting them out the door, but it could also be the reason that they stick around for even longer. The official announcement came in December, but the process was drawn out a hell of a lot longer than that. It's just nice to see some movement on the takeover front. You know, I've pretty much now had the Glazers for longer as owners of Manchester United than from me as a match-going fan, than that they haven't been the owner of Manchester United. And I just want them gone. I'd like to see the club returned into the hands of someone who actually gives a fuck about it. Martin Edwards used to get pelters as Man United CEO. In hindsight now, we didn't know how good we had it. We really didn't know how good we had it. But anyway, Jim Ratcliffe's Ineos takeover battered away interest from the other parties, most notably, allegedly, the Sheikh Jassim Qatar-backed fund, who said they wanted to secure 100%, seemingly wasn't providing the funds that were required by the Rain Group to complete the takeover, whereas Ineos did, and they secured 27.7% of the club. And number 5, the new ownership is serious. So since the takeover, Jim Ratcliffe has assembled a absolute Avengers team around him. Dave Brailsford, Blanc, Wilcox, Barada. Seems like Dan Ashworth is nailed on to be taking over some role as soon as they figure out whatever they need to figure out with Newcastle. It'll take time before you can start seeing the success of this group. It's not like signing a star striker and he can score in his debut and then go on a run of scoring goals. The things that these guys are going to be doing, the processes that these guys are going to be doing, these are planting trees whose shade they'll never sit in, probably. Or even though it's a bit of a metaphor, but certainly shade that you're not going to be sitting in the next 12 months. It takes a long time before you're going to be able to weigh up the success of what these guys have done. It took a good few years and unlimited cash and potentially other things for the Abu Dhabi takeover at Manchester City to sort of start taking root and looking like it was not just going to be some sort of flash in the pan mad exercise. And there'll be mistakes that'll be made, I'm sure. Not every signing they make will be perfect. That doesn't necessarily mean they're any worse than the Glazers. It just means that there is an element of risk involved in football transfers. And for all of the good scouting that happens, sometimes you get a player who just doesn't jive with the environment, whose personality doesn't jive with the changing room, who just had an injury that wasn't picked up. Like, there's so many factors in whether a signing is the right one. I mean, if United had listened to all of the analysts, pundits, the people that had worked with Eric Cantona before we signed him, we wouldn't have signed him. We signed him on a gut instinct. It turns out that Cantona had been incredibly frustrated every single club he'd been, because no club that he'd played for actually wanted to be on the front foot and try and win every single game no matter what. And that's what Manchester United tried to do under Sir Alex Ferguson. And that resonated with what Cantona thought football was all about. All the other managers he played for at some point had tried to play off the back foot, keep it defensive. Their principles weren't exactly the gung-ho, express yourself sort of football like United played with in the early 90s. So, sometimes the bad egg might be a good egg, is just in the wrong hen house. Anyway, that's it for this video. Another season is down in the history books. It was a failure in the league, but a success in the cup. And it might have been one of the best FA Cup performances for a lot of Reds' lifetimes, actually. I'm seeing it talked about amongst the 85 one, the 77 one. It was a good one. It was a good one. And what's it going to do for the careers of Mainu and Garnacho? We will see. Let me know your thoughts on those 5 things, and is anything else that you think we'll look back on as something that we really learned this season? Mainu aside, because we're doing a whole video on him. See you in a bit. Hey, thank you for watching the video. If you are new around these parts, then don't forget to subscribe. My channel is proudly supported by my community on Patreon. If you'd like to get a little bit of extra content, a Discord group, meetups, 5-a-side games, weekly podcasts, behind the scenes, and even an occasional bit of transfer news as and when I get it, then for the price of a pint, you can show your appreciation for the content that we make and get some goodies for doing so as well. Check the link in the description or click the button right here. You'll also find all of my socials here too if you want to follow me on any of those platforms. Nice one.